If you're talking about saving your customer when they're leaving, that's the wrong time to be asking. You need to be talking about retention and expansion as readily as you're talking about acquisition. How many companies discuss acquisition, retention, and expansion in equal parts?
Welcome to the Business Builders Playbook, the show that breaks down the systems and strategies behind predictable revenue growth to win in business. In each episode, we're diving into the proven strategies that separate the winners who scale from the losers who fail. This show is sponsored by BDR.ai, the AI-powered business development platform that automates your outbound prospecting so you can focus in on closing deals instead of chasing leads. Let's get started. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is going to be an exciting episode. I've got a fantastic guest for you today. I've got my friend Maria Trysla, and she's a growth architect and a go-to-market executive advisor. And today's topic is going to be focusing in on primarily the CEO growth plateau. Ever felt that? Have you ever experienced that? I'm assuming that you probably have had some level of that. Some of you have maybe had a full stop, and some of you have just begun to see some slowing down, maybe a little bit fearful about hitting that growth plateau. But we're going to talk about today why companies stall between 5 million and 50 million. And Maria has spent a lifetime working with organizations and helping them to not only break through those plateaus, but to avoid those plateaus. So we're going to talk about the structural mistakes that quietly stall momentum. We're going to talk about how org design and accountability impact revenue velocity and what must change in your go-to-market strategy if you want to scale. So if you are a founder where you have found that everything is dependent on you and you want to develop a repeatable growth engine, you're in for an exciting show. So Maria, thanks so much for joining me. I'm super excited about getting this conversation kicked off.
Thanks, David. It's a pleasure to be here and speaking with you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, before I gave you just a little brief introduction, but bring everybody up to speed of what you have been doing with other organizations and what specifically is your role when you partner with an organization who wants to break through growth plateaus or anything else that you do so everybody has a clear understanding of what you do and for who.
So I'm a former two-time CEO and multi-year CMO of SaaS and technology companies. I started in telecommunications, which I think is the first technology companies, moved into SaaS. And so, largely B2B, but also some B2C. But and you see this, I've seen it repeatedly where, you know, the era of growth at all costs is gone, right? Unfortunately, gig is up, if we say. And so what I tend to do now is, executive advisor or a fractional CMO or CRO, is I come in and dislodge those, that plateau or any obstacles that you're having. So, having been there, done that, this is not my first rodeo. I've seen a lot of things, and that is, there's too many obstacles in generating growth. And, as you said, that CEOs doing this Herculean effort to get to a certain amount of revenue. And then you get you hit a point where it just doesn't, I check, there's only 24 hours in a day and CEOs don't get more. I check. So, it's really about how do you make sure that your revenue levers that you have available to you, acquisition, retention, and expansion, are all operating, as a repeatable engine so that your scalability, the revenue that you're generating is scalable. And what I'm doing now is going into companies, say from really the target we were talking about, 5 to 50 million. And I come in and I can either advise you as to what, how to change that, how to change from that growth plateau to a repeatable engine, or I can stick around and help you execute. So I could set the strategy or I can help with execution. And, I think it's terribly exciting to do it. This discipline is called revenue architecture. And, it's a proven capability that, those that are growing in a sustainable manner, they're doing this on a daily.
Yeah.
Long.
So what do you think that is the reasons behind companies stalling in that revenue range? And even if they have demand for their products and services out there in the marketplace, what's causing them to stall?
So early growth is driven by founders, relationships, right? Opportunistic deal, bursts of marketing activity. And that can carry you to a few million, maybe even 50 million, but it's just not sustainable, right? The CEO may have to take a vacation. What happens then, right? So, what you do to break that plateau is you have to shift from tactical growth to intentional system building that creates predictable pipeline, stronger customer outcomes, and compounding expansion revenue. And that's when growth becomes more scalable and predictable. And I've had situations where, marketing doesn't talk to sales, which I think is really the dumbest situation you could even imagine. And no one's talking to customer success. And really, it should be all of those functions not existing in silos and operating as, one unit.
Hmm. So is there warning signs that you've been privy to or that you've come up with that's kind of like, hey, when this warning sign happens or when this warning indicator light happens, you know that you're going to hit a growth plateau in the very near future?
Yeah. I mean,
Besides the ones that you just mentioned, those ones obviously siloed and, bottlenecks with a CEO, founder-run organization where everything's dependent upon them. Those are I think, the obvious one, but is there anything else that's kind of like maybe the blind spot?
if you have pipeline volatility, if you're experiencing your upper pipeline, or it's either non-existent or generating your upper pipeline takes more, just more cost, more people, more time to generate any sort of, upper pipeline. That's not sustainable. Another signal is when you have acquisition revenue, but it's increasingly offset by churn or lack of expansion. So, that's what we call in marketing a leaky bucket, right? Acquisitions going in and customers are going out through churn. And I remember just being a really large organization, focus on acquisition. Our retention marketing was over on a corner, and they were, promoting and doing save campaigns. If you're doing a save campaign, you're already too late. And then, like you said, I think you can, as a CEO, if you're sitting in that seat, or, maybe a member of the board, if you see organizational misalignment across marketing, sales, and customer success, either each of them are functioning in their role and no one's accountable for the full customer life cycle, that's an issue. I think this is an opportunity for your CEO or a senior member, to bring those functions together, knock some heads and say, really, we're going to be focused continual life cycle from acquisition to retention to expansion. And that's what it means to have the process of creating a revenue architecture.
Yeah. So when you go into an organization and you're trying to fix some of these holes in their leaky bucket, are you getting into the process with each department, marketing, sales, client success, and you're doing a deep dive interview to find maybe the problem behind the problem? Talk me through a little bit more about what that typically looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I like to do, I call it inside out, outside in. And that's just about discovery. It's asking questions, internally. Like, when you lose, why do you lose? Right? That's a question to sales. You know, do you have a defined ICP, ideal customer profile? Do you feel like you have a truly differentiated message, truly differentiated, if I could highlight those or underline them or whatever, not just saying what your competitors are saying. Those are all signals. So I do that inside out. That's what I say. Then it's outside in, talking to your customers. What is it like to be a customer of yours on a day-to-day basis? And a lot of times what's being told to me internally is not what's really happening in the reality of the customer life cycle. So, you really have to be intentional in understanding that. And a lot of times, as a third party, I get different answers than if someone internally was, say, doing this, outside in, inside out process. I might be considered Switzerland or, safe base, if you will. And that becomes really important. And once you talk to a great number of people, there are ideas that bubble up to the top, right? You'll see, you can identify, or I can identify, maybe it's just because I have a few gray hairs, I've been around a little bit. But you see common missteps that are happening, and then you go about and being intentional um, about fixing those. And I'll give you an example, because I was sitting as a CEO of a SaaS company, fast growing, even during COVID, which seems kind of impossible. Um, but my director of customer success brought forth the executive team. They said, from that handoff from sales to customer success, they actually, the customer success team actually did this kind of internal study. And they looked at and they said, hey, if we spend more time in onboarding our customers, and it's going to cause less tickets, down the road. And it builds loyalty from the very beginning of that customer relationship, when they're probably the most pleased with your company, right? And they even had done like a statistical review of, this customer was onboarded with less, issues down the road as far as their customer lifecycle goes. And we implemented it, and it was validated on a larger scale. So it's those moments of truth, especially in handoff from one organization to the other, that can truly build loyalty. And you think, oh, it's just the little things. It can be just the little things, but it's like, death of a thousand cuts, or a positive other than that, that analogy. But truly, like, making sure that those transitions, and that you have a scalable, repeatable revenue engine that really is tied to what the customer wants in its relationship with you. You don't get to necessarily define that inside.
So, if this show is resonating with you and you're ready to take action because you want to scale your business faster, smarter, with more AI and technology and less labor, check out BDR.ai. We help entrepreneurs and executive sales leaders to automate the grind of prospecting so you can focus your time on closing deals and growing revenue where you should be spending your time. With AI-powered data, digital outreach automation, and done-for-you prospecting systems, you'll connect with more qualified leads, book more appointments, and build predictable revenue without adding more hours to your week or the week of your staff. Visit BDR today and discover how our AI Prospect Finder and digital BDR agents can help you to build your pipeline and your profits. Visit BDR.ai, where business builders learn how to automate and scale their playbook. Well, I want to transition into more of just the founder's role, because a lot of businesses in between 5 and 50 million, they're still pretty much founder dependent. And what is your best strategy to move a founder into more of the architect of the business role rather than just the doer role?
It's really that customer having to make a shift. I mean, in the beginning, a founder has to be involved in everything, right? They may be the chief close officer, right, at that point in time, closing every monumental sale. They're shaping the product, right? They know and understand what the brand differentiation is, right? What their company does, that intersection of what your company does well and what the customer wants. And they're shaping that. But there's only, again, so much, time in a day. And so you really need to move from, a intentional system. And that means kind of enabling your executive team, that conversation about, do I have the right people in the right seats? I know you're a football fan. Do we have the right plays, defined and everyone's implementing them? I've found into companies where they don't even have their sales process defined. And so that means every salesperson is quote unquote, doing it on their own. And of course that doesn't build, that long-term value that we're looking for. So it's really about, and there's a couple things you can do. You can enable and build the processes that are necessary so that decision making is done right, even when you're not around. You have operating metrics. Everyone is tied to the same metrics. It's not marketing focused on SQLs and our MQLs, and sales are focused on SQLs and that nonsense. It's like everyone is tied to revenue and churn and expansion metrics. And then there's that, like I said, that leadership layer that just drives accountability. And you have to feel comfortable walking away and making sure that when you're in the room, your executives know and understand how you would make that decision. And you know what? In that we can't replicate every founder and their, kind of mentality is, you know that the decision making is sound. So maybe they didn't make the exact same decision that you would, but there's a reason that executive is saying, well, this is why I made the decision I did. And then the executive has to kind of accept that. And that's the role of accountability, making sure that the team, the executive team, and really maybe any member of the organization that's become critically, successful within that customer support or customer success organization is, and understand that the decisions that you can make. And so it's all about the customer and making sure their customer value is realized every single day in interacting with your product or service.
Yeah. So, talk a little bit more about the most common organizational structures that companies are making mistakes around. I mean, you talked about, the lack of accountability. You talked about maybe the lack of structure and processes and standard operating procedures. But is there anything else that would just jump out at you as being like, hey, if you haven't addressed this and you're a $5 to $50 million company, like just stop and whatever you're doing right now and make it a priority, make it a rock in your commitments for the second quarter or whatever the time frame is you're watching this video. But what comes to mind first when you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it's like stop everything, don't collect $200 or you're not going to collect $200, right? So, one thing is that you again, back to it takes more. So that's a clear signal. But there's some organizational structure. If your sales lead is saying, "Oh, I just need to hire more salespeople," sorry, that's not the answer. If you're over indexing on sales hiring to solve growth problems, you please, it's just stop there, because you have an upstream issue in regards to positioning or demand generation or qualification, something. So don't think that throwing more bodies at the problem is going to solve it. And you could say that definitely for sales, but you could say it in marketing and customer success also. Um, another issue is you have no clear ownership of the post-sale revenue engine. No one's really talking about retention and expansion. You don't have any metrics. Maybe you look at it in a QBR or something like that. And again, if you're not delighting your customers every single day, they will churn. So you have to treat customer success not as a service function, but as a strategic driver of retention and expansion. And not that it's just customer success. I can make an argument in regards to how sales can drive retention expansion, right? From a sales perspective, if they're churning, and you start calling them, 2 weeks before, their 1 year anniversary, that's too late. Check in on them. How is the product and service meeting your needs? How can we do better to meet your needs? That could be something that sales can relate to product in regard to a product fix or something like that. So everybody has to be kind of with that mindset of what can I do that is focused on developing and operating an integrated system designed to grow customer value over time. If everyone is thinking about that, how do I grow customer value over time? And I don't care what function you're in, is, that seamless customer experience. If you can do that every day, those are going to be the common organizational structures that will trip you up. So if you can address those, then you're going to get to a scaling phase faster.
Mm. Is there an experience or like a story maybe that you could share that would maybe give an example of an organization that you went into, and you ended up, pushing some of these levers, to increase sales velocity and execution speed, and just kind of give like a real life scenario of like what was the situation? You don't have to name names or anything, but I'm just kind of curious if the people that are watching or listening to this show, they're saying, "What does this look like in real life? What did you do, and how did that look?" And then what was the time frame before they saw, you know, more throughput on sales velocity and execution?
I'm going to relate to a time when I was a W-2, an employee, right? Um, Kind of before I became a fractional CMO. And it was, I really didn't think it was a situation of marketing versus sales. Um, we seem to be, and I was the lead on marketing, and I had a counterpart in sales, and so I felt, partly responsible for this. But where it existed, where the truth became live, if you will, is through data. So I had a member of my team who was really focused on customer data, and the team, focusing on demand generation was kind of up in arms, and they came to me and they said, "Well, look at the Salesforce data." And, look at all these leads that are sitting at the sales director level that aren't being distributed and aren't being worked. And they were just kind of up in arms. And I said, okay, that's great information. Thanks for giving me that. But I'm not going to be storming into my sales leadership counterpart and going, what are you guys doing? You idiots, look at all this. So what I did is I took that information and I said, okay, based on the uh, sales close rate, so existing close rate that was happening, averaged, NRR. If I could take those leads that were just sitting in Salesforce and being worked, weren't being reacted to, I could take that close rate and the average, customer revenue generated. And I went to the sales VP and said, listen, yes, these aren't being worked. But if you were closing them at your regular rate at the, revenue that you're bringing in, you would be exceeding your, sales target, which by the way, the precursor to that is they were missing their target. They weren't at, they were missing it. They were below, their target for the year, right? For the quarter, for the month, repeatedly. So all of a sudden it became a different conversation. It wasn't, you know, us versus them. It was how we're going to fix this. And I also went in and said, okay, tell me why these leads that are sitting in Salesforce not being worked. Tell me why they're bad. Why, how should he not fit? You and I have agreed on the ICP, and this was not something that we took to the CEO. Well, eventually we told him what we did together, but it wasn't something like, I went up to the CEO and had a conversation. It was just two people who had, really the same goal. I hope your marketing and sales leads have the same goal, right? Um, and it was just this gap that was happening, and we replicated it, right? It became, I started attending like, you know, certain, not all the time, but I would, the sales, meetings in regards to, leads that were sitting at the director level not being distributed. And I would listen in, like, why are they working? Why they're not working? And all of a sudden we turned it around. Now this didn't have it was kind of probably a mid-market company, I guess, not terribly enterprise, didn't have a huge, customer like, or, time to close. So, they were able to turn around that revenue within 3 to 4 months. And it was really just, we're leaving money on the table. And you could say that about expansion. If no one's talking about how to, if you're talking about saving your customer when they're leaving, th- that's the wrong time to be asking. Like,
Mm.
you need to be focused on expansion. And I think here's the key to this. You need to be talking about retention and expansion as readily as you're talking about acquisition. Now, think about that. How many companies discuss acquisition, retention, and expansion in equal parts? Probably not a lot. If you do anything else, there's nothing else that comes out of this. It's that, look at what's going on from a retention and expansion because I dare to say most companies are not as focused on retention and expansion. And I mean, of course, there's that rule of, it costs less money to, retain a customer than it is to acquire a customer. So that's kind of if I could get anything out of this today is, focus on retention and expansion as readily as.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that. I mean, you talk about building predictable go-to-market systems. So if you were to think about the top, two or three strategies or systems, technologies, whatever, that the organizations that you are going in to partner with, what are the three things that you're doing to develop more structured lead generation on the acquisition side?
Yeah. Um, I would say, when you hit that growth plateau, that's how I'm going to talk about it is, really you have to get over that hump, if you will. And it is about like the first thing I would evaluate is your pipeline health and predictability. Can you make forecasts, right? Um, Based on past performance. So, you know, do you have consistent pipeline? That might be an easy thing to be able to identify, right? And just look at it, are you closing to your revenue targets, right? Where you thought you were going to be. I mean, that's red light green. That's kind of pretty basic to be able to do that. If you're doing that, you really need to get, you need to be less episodic and become more predictable and repeatable. And so it's those marketing plays, handoff to sales, which ones are working and which ones aren't working. I'd say like right now, revenue operations is having its day and, you know, in court, if you will. And revenue operations will be able to tell you metrics like, customer acquisition cost, your close rate, how fast how fast are you responding to an opportunity that comes in? If it's days, that's too late. Even if it's a couple hours, that's too late. People, your buyer is doing their research offline and they're not necessarily talking with your salespeople. And so when they're ready to talk to somebody, you better be there. So, look at those episodes that feel like episodes. They shouldn't be. They should be predictable and repeatable. And you have to make them predictable and repeatable. And that's usually through process, which, kind of maybe is the unsexy thing to do, but make sure that everybody knows the plays. I like plays, I would use sports analogies, plays versus processes that, kind of people cringe, if you will. But it's really just making sure that everybody's, in the boat, rowing the same way and doing the same thing to build customer value. And I think, if that, if you're growing your company through effort alone, it's operating as deliberate revenue architecture. And that turns pipeline creation and customer success into scalability and it really drives your next stage of growth. I hope I
Yeah.
answered.
Yeah, and so many sports analogies, and yeah, I love the idea about getting the right people on the bus, and having the right culture, the accountability, the structure, and then having the right playbook that is going to lead to those predictable outcomes. And anything that you could say about retention in terms of strategies or plays that you would highly recommend organizations run on average, just across different industries. There's certain things that if you're not doing these things, your retention is not going to be where it needs to be.
I think, just taking care of your existing relationships and that might be someone is assigned, not that, if you have, the CEO, the company I was CEO with, we had 16 million customers, right? So as a SaaS platform, a little bit of self-serve. But, so it's not like, anyone on the team, I think we were at 25, people at the time, could check in on 16 million customers. But, you have touch points. You can understand there's signals that are showing customer satisfaction or not, and around customer renewals, are people looking at upsells? Are they looking at renewals? Like I said, don't wait until the last minute when that renewal, check in at designated talk, points of their life cycle. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months. Just to check in, even if they're fine with using your product or surveys, just you doing, that, making that intentional. And oh, by the way, it doesn't have to be a person doing it. It could be, you know, you send out an email just checking in, and there's a way to escalate if they want to speak to a person, that kind of thing. But you have to be, it's really, expanded usage. Do you have an easy way for your customer to buy more from you? Or does it have to speak to a customer? Again, back to my example of when I was sitting in the seat as the SaaS CEO, like we had a self-service model. There was a definite, digital customer experience where a customer knew when they got to a certain point, they could move up to a next tier, or not. They would have to use less of the product kind of thing. But, we were intentional in building that digital customer experience. So that's really important to make sure that it's easy to expand revenue. And that might be the duh comment of the conversation we're having, right? Is like, make it easy to buy more from you. Um, and sometimes it's not necessarily, talking again with a customer, with a salesperson or, customer support person. It might be, but if they want to do that, and if it's, they're an enterprise account, high touch, I get where that is, but there are other ways that you can solve for that. And just making sure that you are solving for it.
Mm. We talked a lot about, acquisition and retention. What about moving into expansion? And there's so much talk about AI now, obviously, that can be doing so many different things. Um, do you see AI being a part of that expansion for many organizations? And is that something that you recommend as a strategy or tactic?
I think AI can be a friend as it relates to expansion and even retention too. And it gets to data. AI is very good at, kind of sleuthing through large parts of data. And I trust you have data that you're probably not looking at, right? So if there are signals that your customer is giving you in regard to, are they ready to expand or not, And I think AI is a friend in regards to, data exploration. What is the data telling you? And then you can do that, you can also do that through, asking your customer directly, through AI prompts. Um, but then there's also the opportunity if they want to speak to a human, and sometimes, if that it's necessary, that you make that allowable. So I think AI has a opportunity. It gives us, access to that data, and what is the data meaning to you as compared to, digging through spreadsheets, which can be a nightmare. So I think AI can be a help in regard to, uh, data mining, if you will, in regard to almost like campaign or customer experience touch point execution, because AI can prompt that. And then it's just knowing, understanding. What I say about AI is don't leave your brain at the door, right? AI is a great tool. And I'll quote one of my favorite podcasts, and it's Kara Swisher, who's commented, is really kind of been a journalist in regards to technology and media. And she says, AI is a great tool. A knife is a great tool. In the right hands, it's a great tool, right? It slices a piece of bread, right? But a knife in, say, other capacities could be harmful. I'm not even going to go there, but you know what I mean? So it's a tool. Make sure that you have human intervention in using the tool. And it can be a really valuable asset. I use it daily. I don't think I'm an AI proficient, but I'm getting that. We're all a work in progress. Explore. Don't be tentative about. You need to explore. Even the CEOs out there, you know, not to know everything about AI, but think about how it can be used in your day to day existence, kind of thing. So
That's great. Well, I want to talk about some things that you've experienced in working with different CEOs of different levels of revenue. Are there anything or any specific traits or qualities that you have noticed between a $5 million CEO and a $25 million CEO that you could tell that they grew into becoming a $25 million CEO? The numbers just didn't go up. They actually became the kind of CEO that drew the numbers up, if that makes sense. Anything that you could recognize?
yeah, I think it's that conversation about being um, founder led as compared to founder inspired. And so what does that mean? Founder led means I'm closing every sales deal or maybe every, large sales deal. We trot out the CEO kind of midway through the sales life cycle. Well, maybe that can be, you know, reserved for, the highest revenue opportunities, that kind of thing. But be founder, if you're founder led, and again, back to our conversation about the founder is shaping the product or the service, right? They're involved in customer support escalations, right? They're closing deal. They're working with marketing to define, the ICP and the differentiated positioning against competitors. That's just not sustainable. And I don't know exactly, I'm sure it exists between 5 and 50 million. I can't tell, oh, it happens always at 10 million, right? It's specific to your industry, specific to your company. But it really gets to you have to become somewhat hands off. You have to be comfortable not making every decision. And that's where, you can see, and I mean, and it's kind of intuitive, right? That's where scalability happens. If people are waiting around for your decision before they can take action, that's going to slow your momentum, right? So if there's anything is get comfortable not always having to make, you know, final decisions. And when other people make final decisions, support them in that, right? Build accountability. Um, ask everyone from bottom to the top of the organization, how can I make you more successful? I love that line. Like I tell, you know, customers that I'm working with, as a fractional or consultant, what can I do to help you? What can I do to remove obstacle? I've said that to employees who directly report to me. How do I make you more efficient in doing your job better? And that's that mindset of if I make, if I remove decision friction, then the pipeline creation is only going to get faster, right? So, and consistency. Look for consistency in that, your acquisition and retention, you know, plays are, those are probably the ones less practiced, my hypothesis. Make sure they're consistent, that people understand it, that they know and understand, when to step in and when that's happening. And it's really about high performing companies establishing clear ownership across every motion, acquisition, retention, expansion. And they do that by having shared metrics and, no everybody knows and understands who's doing what to whom, right? Um, and that's where customer value and predictable growth goes. So that CEO, I hate to say it, like allow yourself to get out of the way. I know that
Mhm.
sounds pretty negative, but I've seen CEOs go, wow, if I didn't have to be involved in every decision, what could I be focused on, right? I could be focused on what's happening in the marketplace. I could be out getting more investment. I could be, reshaping the product for the future, how to leverage AI, you know, in today's marketplace where adoption might be slower in your industry or sector. I mean, those are the things. That's the mind share you want your CEO, to be thinking about, and not necessarily, you know, um, the final decision making in regards to, a dilemma within. And that's how you remove, decision friction. I think I love that word, that phrase. This is, remove friction and move on to other things that really can drive value overall for the company.
Yeah, I definitely pick up what you're laying down, and I think that there is going to be some people that are watching or listening to this particular show, and they're saying, wow, I am the bottleneck. I am the plateau. I am the ceiling. And it's because of decisions that I have made or the decisions I haven't made. I haven't made some of the hard decisions. I heard one person say that the role of a CEO is not to be the chief executive officer, it's to be the chief executing officer, which means that they're executing on specific strategies that are breaking the business to go to that next level. And so let's just set aside the idea that personal and professional growth and development is probably one of the biggest reasons why a company has maybe hit a growth plateau. What are the three things that let's just say that a company is experiencing a growth plateau right now, if you were to say the three areas that they should evaluate immediately as kind of we're landing the plane here, what are the three things that they should go in and inspect so that they can get what they expect?
Um, you need to change. My hypothesis is I'm going to offer up is you really need to change the company's sales and marketing approach. And it needs to be less episodic, like I said, and more repeatable. So less activity driven, as compared to system driven. So, you know, if you're operating through campaigns, right, or uh, opportunistic deals, if you're looking at that, then that's signaling a problem, and you really have to look at that and say, do I have the clear targets? Do I have conversion metrics? What's the, what is the data telling us in regards to what's going so you really have to that's a big shift to move from, episodic to repeatable. Um, you do need to have tight alignments across, I think, across the organization. I mean, of course, it makes sense for marketing and sales to have tight alignment and have common objectives, but also customer success. I kind of mentioned that too, but also bring in product, right? Um, Product, maybe doesn't have that daily touch with the customer. And they're maybe not thinking about solving a customer problem because they're not aware of the customer problem, right? And when we said that, again, back to my example of the director of customer success that talked about if we take more time onboarding, it's going to create less issues. Well, we have to do something from a product perspective. Slight adjustment. Engineering did it. We did it pretty fast. And, so having, all your senior executives, HR, obviously, finance, everybody at the table and knowing, understand how you're going to grow. And, I would say, I was, as an executive advisor, I was telling one CEO, it's like, even talk to finance and HR, and they may say, oh, we're back office support, or IT, right? If they don't understand how they're enabling customer value, tell them, figure it out, right? HR, we need the best people. We need to retain our best people. Finance people, we have a very easy way to recognize revenue, right? IT, make sure the system's up and running, right? Make sure people can send emails, whatever, or be ready when your platform goes down because it will go down if it's when. And it's nothing against shade on IT or engineering. It's just, inevitable. But, those are the kind of things that you really have to, that signal it out. And, and I can't miss this one is like You just have to be focused on, looking at retention expansion. Do not ignore those levers. It's really important. And a lot of companies don't. They don't have a loyalty program, right? They don't have a referral program. Boy, a referral program is one of the easiest things to implement. You have, word of mouth and you're giving, a reward to your existing customer that might recommend it to somebody else. Loyalty program, whatever that looks like, just be intentional in setting those programs and getting them up and running. Those are probably common mistakes that people aren't looking, what metrics they're looking at, but, setting those programs in motion and making sure they're repeatable and sustainable. And they might be, hands-on at first, but get them to a point where they're executing on a daily basis, maybe, now that we're in the age of AI, without minimal human involvement.
Hmm. Well, you've dropped a tremendous amount of value with this today. Let's talk a little bit more about what it looks like if an organization wants to reach out and have a conversation with you. We'll put your contact information with the show notes and all of the resources in the video description. But walk us through what that process looks like.
Yeah, if this messaging resonates, or if you say, "Man, that's going on in my organization," um, or "I wonder if it's going on in my organization," if you have those questions, or maybe more simple question to ask yourself is, "Do you know where your next 5 to 10 million in revenue is coming from?" If you have a blank stare, I'd love to talk with you. I'm helping, um, organizations get, you know, right size, if you will, in regards to growth. I can be reached via LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Maria Trysla, Trysla, on LinkedIn, but reach out. Would love to have a conversation with you and see if I can help you. I do subscribe. I'll tell you right now, I subscribe to the theory to give is to get. And so a lot of times I'll say, well, I can't help you, but somebody else can. So, uh, you know, don't hesitate to reach out because I might know somebody is a better fit than me. So LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Yeah, that's so good. Well, man, we sure appreciate all the pearls of wisdom that you shared with us today, and looking forward to getting feedback. If those of you that have been watching this or listening to this particular show, if you have feedback, we'd love to see a comment. We'd love to see you share it with somebody else that you think that would benefit from hearing from Maria and some of the answers that she provided. And just one final question for you, Maria. We're coming upon March Madness. Your Nebraska Cornhuskers ranked number 4. Do they have a clear path to the championship? Or are we hopeful? What are you thinking?
Okay, what kind of world do we exist in where Nebraska is now a basketball school? Also, number one in women's volleyball. My daughter graduated from IU. I said, it must be Armageddon when IU is a football school and Nebraska is a basketball school. Um, Man, they didn't do well in the Big Ten tournament. I was disappointed, but they lost to Purdue. My husband's a Purdue grad, so we'll have to fight about that. I don't think they're going to get to the championship. I hate to say it out loud, but I don't think so. I'm going to say grade 8.
Okay,
How about this?
nice. Well,
Grade
we
8.
will we will we will timestamp this particular show with Maria's predictions. So, if Nebraska reaches the Elite Eight, then we'll see if she was a great supporter, and if they win the ship, we'll have evidence that she did not believe at the time that they were going to win. But yeah, it's been fun talking with Maria. Appreciate your friendship with BDR.ai, and we look forward to great success as we help more organizations to break through that growth plateau.
Thanks you, David. I mean, you're providing a great service, just a different mindset and getting people out of their daily lives and really having conversation. It's great.
Great.
But thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Builders Playbook. If this episode gave you some plays that you can start running in your business today, hit subscribe and share with another revenue leader who's tired of the pipeline grind. Building predictable revenue isn't something you figure out alone. Whether you're looking to automate your prospecting with BDR.ai, or you just want to talk through the growth challenges you're facing, reach out. We help business leaders just like you to build systems that actually scale. And if you're ready to stop being your company's highest paid prospector, let's have a conversation. Reach out to us at bdr.ai. Until next time, let's keep building.